going in the wrong direction, and to have a conversation about his follow-up book, The Dumbest Generation Grows Up, From Stupefied Youth to Dangerous Adults. Dr. Mark Bauerlein, good morning to you. Thanks for being on.
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
Praise be to God. It's good to have you. Now, 13 years since the original book that has come out. Do you feel vindicated? Have you corrected anything? What are your thoughts, just on a general level?
Well, unfortunately, I'm very sorry to say that it's actually worse than I predicted. The new tools that have come about, the acceleration of consumption of screen time, they're off the chart that I was looking at in 2008. And as you say, the minutes just keep going up. And if you look at surveys like the American Time Use Survey, you would think that when the kids leave adolescence, they'll get some better habits. But when we look at 30-year-olds now, which is where the millennials were 15 years ago, their reading time hasn't gone up. The leisure reading they do is still about 6 or 7 minutes a day on average. So it's not as if the screen time is an adolescent feature. The damaging thing for them is that the screen time hit them so hard during the years of formative education, when you really need to get a little of that exposure to history and politics and religion, of course, and great books, good music, good movies. And that has to come in during those ages as a counterweight to all the peer pressure, the social contact, the youth culture that now is just a tidal wave for them, starting in those aught years. It's something that had never happened before. I'm Joe. I'm not sure how old you are. I'm 62, but when I would go home in 1975 and go into the front door for dinner, social life was over. There was one phone in the house. It was called a landline, and you actually had to turn a wheel, with your finger. There was one TV in the house. There were 5 TV stations. That's it. And so, I had to sit over dinner, and I didn't want to do this, but I had to listen to Walter Cronkite. I had to hear people talk about something called Watergate. And, I couldn't tune out. I couldn't check out. With the digital tools, they could go upstairs and go into their bedroom and open up to the social space once more. They could shut out the adult world of the parents downstairs and do youth time, youth world, all night long. They could sleep with the cell phone right next to their pillow, so that if an Instagram or something comes through, it'll wake them up at 1 a.m, and they can respond. They still watch TV with heavy hours. The TV time didn't go down very much at all. They could have multiple streams going, the video game going, the new iPhone, texting, Twitter had come out in 2008. So the options just keep proliferating. And then, Joe, one thing to remember is that Silicon Valley wanted this to happen, wanted our kids to get hooked. They hired experts in psychology and neuroscience in addiction and attention. They wanted the kids, because the more time the kids are hooked, the more money they make. They don't let their own kids get on these tools. Steve Jobs famously didn't let his kids get on the tools all the time. They send their kids to the Waldorf School in Silicon Valley, which is low tech. They know what these tools do to adolescents. They don't keep them away, but they sure flood our kids with them.
Dr. Bauerlein, you stole the question right out of my mouth. I was going to ask you, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about the addictive quality of this tech that is developed and how it affects a developing brain. As a teenager, your brain is still developing. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, a simple example. LinkedIn will come up on your page, and it'll have all these suggestions for you, for people to link with. And it looks at your profile. It might look at your school, the school you attended, and maybe find other people who attended that school. Might find a link you have with someone, and someone has some friends, connect you to that people, and you're building a network, and it shows pictures of these people. And you go, wow, I remember her from sophomore year. Look at her now. And it's a draw. And the thing is, if you scroll down, it'll give more pictures. Keep scrolling and adding more photos, more suggestions. It'll go on forever. You can go look. You can be stuck on that screen, and it's a draw. The temptation is strong. They know how to build these things, and that's an adult thing. With the video games, they key the video game just to a level that's a little hard. If it gets too easy, the video game will get harder, because the brain wants that challenge. And then it wants the triumph over that challenge. And so they do the pacing of these videos so that they match what the brain most wants to have to get that, dopamine rush.
Hold that thought. We were tying into sort of that dopamine psychological manipulation that happens on social media. Definitely been seeing a lot of that. But I kind of want to tap into real quick, as a professor, I've heard you talk about this in some of your lectures and interviews. You're seeing these kids come from high school into college, and they are ill prepared. They are underwhelming. They are not where they need to be, and that seems to be the standard. But it also, I would ask, and I want to get your opinion on this. It seems to me college has been happy to dumb itself down to meet them down at their level, rather than try to bring these people up to their level. The hijacking of college these days. What would you say about that?
Let's be clear that more and more higher education regards 19 and 20-year-olds not as students, but as customers. And the university is conceived as a brand. And it's a marketing thing. They've got to recruit students. One thing people don't realize is universities compete feverishly with one another. I was at Emory. Emory would like to compare itself to Vanderbilt and to Duke and Tulane. And if Vanderbilt's application pool gets bigger and Emory's doesn't, Emory's admissions office goes ape. We got to do something about this. This is the thinking. It's very much of a commodification of education. And the money is so massive. There's so much money pouring into these schools, passing through them. The endowments that the schools are sitting on. Harvard's endowment is what now? $45 billion.
Wow.
It's the biggest one in the world. But it really is a change that you see down into the undergraduates. When I started in 1990 teaching at Emory in English, you always had a few bookish kids in class. They were a little offbeat. They weren't so caught up in grades, but they were curious. If you'd mentioned an author in class who wasn't on the syllabus, that student might go read something, buy that author, and then come into your office and talk about it. That bookish kid, gone at this point. The students are much more instrumental about their education. They're thinking in more career terms than in formation terms. And I think that I'm going to come back and pinpoint something dear to all of us, and that is too many of these kids were raised without religion, without faith, without any real transcendent horizon for their lives. And so education is much more about immediate experience and career plan. They're not thinking about their spiritual development, their aesthetic development, the cultivation of a moral life, and a life in which prayer is a daily component, a life in which they are relating to the Father or the Son, any religion. We'll just say this, and it leads them to regard the rest of their lives in, again, instrumental terms. The higher calling isn't there. And we know the phenomenon of the nuns. It's pretty heavy among the millennials. It's not that they're atheists. Many of them call themselves spiritual, but they have no real spiritual life. They don't go to church. They don't worship. They don't pray. There's just some hazy, therapeutic idea for them. This is an awful thing that we have done in our society to the young, to raise them without God, to raise them without immersion in the Bible. Every home had a Bible. Every word that Abraham Lincoln ever wrote had King James somewhere in the back of his mind. Martin Luther King, the Bible, it's everywhere in the greatness of the American past, but not in the 21st century.
Yeah.
This was a terrible thing to do to young people, and it's part of letting them dive into the screens, letting them immerse themselves in one another and not step out. And we know the times when Jesus has to say, I must go off by myself. I must go out in solitude. I must be alone. And of course, he's not alone. He's communing with the Father, among other things, but he's getting away from others in order to, to reorient, right? To ground. Kids don't do this. They don't want to be alone. They don't want the solitude. They don't want to face the bigger realities, surround themselves with friends. When Mark Zuckerberg says the goal of Facebook is so that no one ever has to be alone ever again. What an awful thing to do. Part of growing up is learning to be alone. And one of the things that really helps you be alone, one of the things that got Robinson Crusoe through his isolation on that island was the presence of God. What a terrible thing not to give to the young.
Dr. Bauerlein, there's so much there, what you said. We have about 5 minutes left in our conversation, and just a million other questions to ask. But real quickly, we were talking about this in related to spirituality, and I think that's incredibly insightful because of a number of things. One being, I talked to friends of mine. I'm 23 years old. My friends would range around that age as well, and we're talking about how there is a lack of ability of young people to meditate and to pray. It's difficult, and that's one of the reasons why I love the rosary, because it starts bringing us more and closer to being able to actually start meditating on these things. The great saints have talked about 30 minutes of mental prayer every day. We talk about these kind of things that's happening, and people are become incapable of it, and that's one of the reasons why there's a huge movement of young people going towards the Exodus 90 movement. But the question I have for you is that so many people say, I cannot pray, I cannot read, I have ADHD, I have ADD, I'm not able to do this, I have some kind of mental disorder, and so I'm incapable because of my brain, I'm not able to actually do these kind of things. Is that true, or is it just that we're getting zapped by technology and our attention spans are just destroyed?
Well, I think both sides are true. The technology is demanding their attention all the time. The phone buzzes, the screens are on everywhere. You can't find a quiet spot in an airport anymore. It's awful. But I would add that prayer is something that you have to be taught to do. I think sometimes young people say that, well, really, I need to get into the whole mode, the whole mental attitude with God before I can pray. No, here's what I want you to do. I want you to say 20 times in a row on your way to school, Lord, I am not worthy. Say the whole lines. That you should enter under my roof, but only say the word of my soul shall be healed. Lord, I am not worthy. Just say it 20 times and count it. All right. Do the ritual. Don't worry if it sounds mechanical. Don't worry if it seems like it's just an empty rehearsal. Just do it. And you will find, right? You will find that practice, the activity will lead you into the frame of mind that you expect you should be in before you can even start to pray. So just go through the motions, and the miracle is that the motions will have a genuine effect. But they have to be taught. Young people have to be taught to do this, and too many parents just checked out, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And the thing is, they hit 30 years old, and they're not satisfied. They're unhappy. That's the thing about the millennials. They are bitter, disappointed. They feel like life hasn't turned out the way they thought it would, because they thought that life would be that utopia of the 15-year-old bedroom. That's not reality. There are disappointments, difficulties, and you need grounds. You need support. You need faith. You need trust in something bigger. And that's what we didn't give them.
We have about a minute and a half left in our conversation. And with that, I guess I want to ask one last question. Soon this generation will be in charge of the nuclear arsenal. What are your thoughts?
You know what I'm going to say. I'm worried. I'm pessimistic. The anger we see with millennials is leading them into utopian visions of socialism and Black Lives Matter, Antifa in more extreme cases. They are angry at America, and they're incapable, again, of handling difficulty, like the election of Donald Trump. They were traumatized by that. Because they didn't get to win every time. So the worry is that they don't have the equipment to handle adversity. They can't say mercy, mercy, mercy.
No.
Lord help me.
We all remember the memes of the crying with the loss of Hillary Clinton. We are out of time, though. Dr. Mark Bauerlein, he's got a book coming out in February from Regnery called The Dumbest Generation Grows Up, From Stupefied Youth to Dangerous Adults. Check them out at their website at Regnery. But Dr. Bauerlein, thank you for your time today. God love you and God bless you.
Thank you, sir.